Hello there, Mercer Island community. My name is Fred Rundle, Superintendent of our school district, and joining me today is Matt Sullivan, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. By now, this is becoming a bit of a routine, which is a great thing. This is our fourth time giving this presentation. We've annually updated it each year since we've been together in our roles over the last 4 years. And this is just the next iteration to give you some ideas about where do we stand financially as a school district? And we always need to go and root back into our why. And our why always goes back into our vision and our mission, and that students are the priority, and that in our values are backed by what's best for the whole child. Are we providing those safe and supportive learning environments? Is it equitable and accessible to our students? And certainly, is it rigorous? And so when we're making budget decisions, they're a reflection of this. And in the current climate and times, these are some really challenging decisions that we're having to make because we're not in that growing period, we're in that shrinking, especially with enrollment, and we'll get into that today. So if we look at our agenda, what we hope is that we give you context of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going from a financial standpoint. What does student enrollment look like across our school district? How is funding shaping up in the state of Washington, especially since we're in the midst of a legislative session right now? Take a look at the ongoing challenges that we see now and in the future, the opportunities that are ahead, and some next steps. So we want to start with enrollment. That's our biggest driver of our revenue stream. I'm going to start off from, and the next 3 slides are all from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, and this is Washington State. And this is taking a look at births over time. This is important for us, of course, because we need to be thinking about those incoming kindergarten classes. In and around 2016 is where our state really peaked with its birth rates. And as you can see, we've been on a steady decline ever since. This is in King County as well as the state, and we're seeing this nationally as well. If we kind of fast forward here and we start heading out into these outward years, we can see that the trend is continuing. And what we also then have to look at is what's happening with our 18-year-olds, our seniors, and then our incoming kindergartners. What this is showing us is that from 2020, if we start pushing it out, we can predict to see that we're going to have more seniors in our system and fewer kindergartners, and that is going to be a big driver for enrollment decline. And this paints the picture the most. We can really see that last year, the state had about 87,000 seniors and only 71,500 thereabout kindergartners. That delta is really what we're seeing, because as those big classes graduate out, we're just not replacing it with as many kindergartners. So let's take a look at why that's sometimes a challenge. One of the challenges is that elementary students receive the same apportionment, which is the money from the state, as our seniors, as our 8th graders, as our 7th graders. But by nature of our elementary schools, our elementary students don't tend to cost as much. In other words, a high schooler, we need counselors. We've got a bigger school, so we need more custodians. And so just the overall cost is hard. Well, when you have fewer kindergartners or elementary students than you do in the high school, that can pose some challenges on the financial side, which is different than back in the 2010 to 16 era when we had large elementary schools and then they were matching those larger high schools. We need those because we want to make sure that we're driving money across our system. We want to make sure certainly that we have enough support in our elementaries, our middle schools, and our high schools. So if we take a look then, historical projection for our enrollment here on Mercer Island, you can see that 2018-19, kind of that pre-pandemic, that was the end of our large schools or our large school districts. Since then, because of birth rates, and then certainly we saw a drop during COVID, we've been on this slow decline, which was projected even back in 2018-19. It was reaffirmed by our demographers that we did 3 years ago. But this year you can see we're at 3,825, and we're projecting to be down around 3,750 or thereabouts as we head into next school year. This stair step is really what we have to start thinking about as we ready the system for continued declining enrollment, going back again to those birth rates and just fewer kindergartners coming in. But you can see our kindergarten, first and second grades are all below 250. Kindergarten is below 200. We'll see a small increase because of kindergarten private school students in Montessori's and other options coming in first grade, and that's typical. But we do foresee that the next several classes for years to come are going to be below 250. So this next group that's going to be heading into our middle school, that's kind of the next drop down, and that's just sub 300. And then it's the last group here in our high school is kind of experiencing the very tail end of those large classes up through, or that large number up through 2016. So this year's 8th graders, as they move into 9th grade, that'll kind of be the end of that 350 student range for our schools. And then if we take a look at next year, this is what we're anticipating. And there again, we look at the smaller 4 classes here, K through 3, a step up for 4th through 8th, and then our last step up for 9 through 12. So open enrollment, we are going to be open to open enrollment again next year. However, it will continue to be very targeted. It is not here to solve our entire enrollment challenge. It's just meant to make sure that we are softening the impact. In other words, how do we maintain programs and opportunities, especially in elective classes and other activities in and out of the classroom at the high school, and to some degree our middle school. So right now we have about 70 students who are here because either their parents work in the district, which is state law, or as our board passed several years ago, city staff members' kids can come to our schools. We have another about 70, just over 70, who are here through our open enrollment process. Those are 6th graders through 12th grade. We're not opening to our elementary schools. And so it makes up under 4% of our total population. So we'll continue with some open enrollment next year. We've started that process, taking a look at where we might be. And this just kind of shows that we are closed in elementary and we have open or limited open in the other 6 through 8 with some closures in things like high cap 6th grade and middle school, as well as pathways. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our expert, Matt Sullivan, who really understands the ins and outs of the school accounting side.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Some context as we talk about things like apportionment, about revenue and expenditures. Here's an opportunity for kind of school financing 101. We operate in 5 major funds. We have our general fund, which, as it states, kind of everything emanates from there, all expenditures, all revenue. We have our transportation fund that takes care of our busing, our home to school, student ridership, etc. We have our debt service fund. Back many years ago, we passed our bond. This is where we pay for our bond. Taxes are collected via King County, and out of that fund comes those payments. We have our capital projects fund. Every 6 years or so, we pass a cap tech levy, and that money from King County ends up there for things like software, technology, our minor cap projects throughout the district. We had new carpeting in our elementary schools recently and painted them. This is where that comes from. And then finally, our ASB fund, or Associated Student Body Fund. This is funds raised by students for students. We use the acronym CARS, Cultural, Athletic, Recreational, and Social. Everything comes from the ASB fund for our students. Where do our expenditures go towards? In 24-25, we have actuals on the screen. The most important thing, and most of the majority of our revenue goes towards our staff. About 84.7% of our budget goes towards that. That's a combination of our general fund, and as mentioned before, our cap tech fund also. But you can see certified salaries at 44.7%, classified about 19%, and then 21% goes towards benefits.
Can you just talk a little bit about, is 84% pretty normal for school districts? And you've worked in a couple, but as you talk to others as well, are we in the ballpark, or what does that look like?
We are in the ballpark. About 80% to 85, 86% typically in a school district go towards their staff. We are on the higher end, but typical around the mid-80s. Fund balance, we call it our money in the bank, or think of this as our savings. This is important and vital to our districts. We receive apportionment on an uneven basis throughout the 12 months. And so in those lower months, such as October, November to April, or March to April, we need that savings, that money in the bank, so we can pay our bills. As remedial as that may sound, it's important to the functioning of our district. As you can see, in 21-22, when myself and Fred started in the district, we had a very low fund balance, almost, one could say, almost unhealthy. And we've worked solidly year after year to slowly but surely bring that fund balance up. We sit at about 4% currently, but it's important that we have that solid savings in the bank. As we rebuild our fund balance over these past few years and then moving forward coming years, we want to be sure that we're not affecting student achievement, student programs. We're not affecting and cutting deep cuts to staff. In business services, we say we're threading a needle on a regular basis, but it's important that it doesn't abjectly affect staffing and student programs.
One of the things that you've taught me over the last several years is that, you know, these lines, we can make that line steeper, but it comes, as you said, at a cost. You're cutting programs, you're adding the maximum number of kids into every single classroom, and that's not the impact that we've wanted to have. So our strategy has been a slow and steady recovery, rather than seeing a steep decline like this, which was coming out of COVID, but then our recovery to make sure we maintain program needs to be more systematic there.
There we go. And as we briefly touched upon, you can see how in 21-22 there was a 2.4%, but mind you, we also had taken a $2 million loan against ourselves, so we had to pay that back also. But you can see 3.7% in 22-23, then 3.7, 23-24, and 4% in 24-25. So steady and slow, but we're making progress. Why it's critical? Like I said, it's savings. It's that money in the bank that we need to pay in those lean months, if you will. But more so, OE7, operational expectations the board has of Fred, our superintendent, but also our staff, is that we should have 8 to 10% in savings in that fund balance. So it covers 2 months of operating costs. And more so, it gives us breathing room for when we mentioned before, the state apportionment doesn't come in like it should at 8 or 9%, it comes in at 5%. And then also, there's always the idea of the emergency that comes in or comes into play. If we have a student that has some needs that we can address quickly, that fund balance helps that. Oh, something we can take a look at also, and we encourage you to, is almost on a monthly basis, the business services, myself, provides to the board what we call our financial dashboard. This is our reconciled finances from the previous month that we present to our school board, and you can see the amazing widgets and the active spreadsheet that is there. So please take a look at that via our board docs and what's provided month over month to our school board.
And while this is hard to see in this particular presentation, I just want to reiterate that these are our attempts to continue to be transparent with our community. And as Matt said, we are updating the board on almost on a monthly basis. The almost is because sometimes a board meeting falls too soon to the beginning of a month and we don't have everything reconciled. But if you ever have questions, we encourage our community to reach out on some of these.
Great. So what have we done to avoid the shortfall or shortfalls? We're always on point for accurate and conservative student enrollment estimates. If you overestimate and underdeliver an enrollment, it does affect the bottom line. So we're always working towards as accurate as we can be. 2, reductions in staffing. Sadly, we have to look at reductions in staffing, but also reductions in our MSOC, which is an acronym for materials, supplies, and operating costs. We don't like doing those things, but it is a part of the equation when it comes to breaking even in the budget. We've performed limits to travel and spending. We also have a wonderful partnership with MIEA. They've been great partners over the years when it comes to knowing what our finances are and making every attempt to be partners with us as we move forward. Strategic budgeting and accounting practices, as always, and a commitment to efficiency, meaning we look at all those account codes, all the funds, and seeing how can we, like I said earlier, thread that needle to make a balanced budget on an annual basis. And then, is this a problem unique to MISD? Not even close, not even remotely. Sadly, since COVID, and then prior to that, since the legislature with the McCleary decision opted to put a cap on the levy, many school districts in the state, a record number, are in binding condition or closely being monitored by the state of Washington. We're not there. We're not being closely monitored. We're not in binding condition, so we're in a good spot compared to many other districts. We have performed a portion advance request. This is once again that attempt to thread that needle to even out our apportionment throughout the year so we can meet all the financial goals that we have, all the commitments that we have. They look at interfund loans, which we performed prior to my arrival, which we are not doing, so no worries there. We're not deficit spending either, but many districts are. And we also had the dearth, if you will, of ESSER funds. Because we are a quote-unquote wealthy district, because we don't have low poverty, we didn't receive the funds in proportion to many other districts that they received. Case in point, I came from the Vashon Island School District, a district that is 2/3 smaller than Mercer Island. They had $2.5 to $3 million in ESSER funds, when we, Mercer Island, only received $1 million in ESSER funds. Some context there. And then there's also student enrollment uncertainty. Now there's bills in the legislature currently that hopefully address that for next year, but we'll see what that happens. All right, 25-26, mid-year adjustments. We know that moving into this year, we're always going to look at ways we can save, if you will, ways we can be proactive in regard to our budget and finances. So enrollment was 25 FT lower than expected. Not a great mark, but we weren't far off, but it still affects the bottom line. So we looked at reductions in MSOC, once again, material, supplies, and operating costs. We performed apportionment advance. We're looking at all purchases across the board, review of contracts also, and then we're looking at extra and added time and monitoring and working with our principals along with travel to see where and what we actually and truly need to spend.
So I think we're going to continue to see some financial challenges into the future. If we just take a look at three big buckets of revenue and expenditures for our school district, starting over here in special education, again, we anticipate that we'll have a negative delta between what the state funds versus what we spend to support our students who are on an IEP. And that is, we are anticipating around $4.6 million. If we slide over to those material, supplies, and operating costs, insurance, lights and utilities, just general update, we will be close to $2 million in the hole on that particular piece. Again, in the hole doesn't mean we're deficit spending. It means we need to take it out of other places because the state is not fully funding us. And the last area is transportation. We've been able to keep this less on the negative side and impacting us at a lesser degree, but we'll still be around $700,000 short compared to what we believe we need to provide for transportation to get our students to and from school safely versus what comes back to us from the state. It's also important to know that the state is giving us around $127,800 to pay our educators, and this is on the certificated side. But when you really take into account all of the benefits and the insurance and other costs, an average teacher is closer to $155,000. So even the amount that we're paying our staff and the benefits isn't fully covered by the state to the tune of almost $28,000. So again, our levies become an important factor there. If we take a look at our benefits, something that is controlled by the state, we no longer control it at the district level. What we're spending on insurance per state law and requirements is not what the state actually funds us on. And so we'll continue to struggle as we head into the future without some changes at the legislative level. But we do have some reasons to be hopeful. We do have a legislative session going on right now that'll help us. But last year in the legislature, they increased the capacity that districts can ask for in their levy, particularly the EP&O levy, by $500 per student. So right now we have a ballot initiative out there. If you're seeing this before February 10th, please make sure you vote. It's not my position to tell you how to vote, or that's not our job, but we want to make sure we get the right information so that people can make an informed vote. Other important pieces of our EP&O levy, that enrichment programs and operations levy, is our 7-period day at the high school, which doesn't always seem like an obvious one, especially if your kids are in elementary school. But as your kids get into high school, this means 4 more electives that they have during their high school time. It could mean an off period so that students can work and catch up. It could mean retaking a course for which a student struggled. So it provides that flexibility. The state only funds us for 6 periods a day because a student needs 24 credits to graduate. That levy helps with that. Our elementary schools being able to maintain, at least at this point, our 4 elementary school model, and then thinking about some of the other things that the state doesn't cover. The state requires us to have 12 days of sick leave for our certificated staff. They only fund for 4 days. And so there are some of those deltas that people are not always aware of that pre-McCleary or before we could cover, just becoming harder and harder on some of those things. So we do have obligation to attract and retain great teachers and bus drivers and nurses and paraeducators and principals, but certainly we have to keep up with what's happening in the market. And so we have committed to IPD, which is basically the COLA, plus 1% for next year. We know that our staff continues to become more experienced, either because they've been here for a length of time or they're earning more graduate credits, and so that increases our total costs. And then, as we said, our health insurance. The delta isn't as large as it's been, but it continues to be a challenge for us. And so this just takes a look at raises historically over time that we've had in our school district. This was coming out of the McCleary era. We had about 10 years where there wasn't a COLA by the state at all. So there was some catch up here. But as you can see, as inflation has gone up and down, we haven't always kept up. And so we're trying to make sure that we can continue to have staff members who will drive through 2, 3, and 4 school districts, so they want to stay right here on Mercer Island. So just lastly, some solutions here. I think, Matt and I will kind of piggyback on this one, but from an enrollment standpoint, we have a mantra. How do we attract new families? How do we retain them once they're here? And then if they've gone somewhere else, how do we get them to return? How do we reach out, especially into our private schools, so that families who live in the 98040 zip code want to attend here? We have to take a look at student fees, and I know we have some questions from community members around fees, and it's not different than the grocery store or other places. As costs are going up, revenue streams are not keeping up with those from the state and other areas. We're really looking at that. We'll continue to advocate down in the legislature, and then we have to continue to reduce where we can, either personnel or in our operating costs. Solutions for school funding. You want to take this one here, Matt?
Sure. As we mentioned before, one thing we don't like to do, but it is things we have to do, is look at staffing and operating reductions. It's just plain and simple. In particular, especially with our class sizes, we want to make sure that we are equitable, that we're equal to our staffing model, to students in each class, each section, if you will. And then also, we're looking at legislative action and advocacy. Right now, myself, through the Alliance, which is a group of 6 school districts, working through K&L Gates, we monitor legislation, especially during this session, and how can it benefit our districts. But also, we look at specific bills that are targeting things such as transportation or enrollment stabilization. And those are things that we are advocating for in Olympia specifically.
And we certainly are really pushing hard of no new mandates that aren't funded. So no unfunded mandates. And then we know the budget is tight for the state, but no reductions in K-12. We're already underfunded. How do we maintain for that? So I want to thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, we're here to help answer them. Our goal is transparency, it's also accuracy, and it's also honesty. And so on behalf of Matt, our entire finance team, and the rest of our entire school district, we appreciate all of the support, the continued investment in our schools, and we will continue to carry forward with our mission, which is doing the very best we can to make sure our kids can go from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. Have a great day.